The people who call you worthless are often the same people who fear the truth you haven't discovered yet. I used to believe my parents when they said I was the disappointment of the Carter family. It wasn't something they shouted. It was much quieter than that. It lived in the sigh my father let out every time he looked at my report cards. It echoed in the polite smile my mother forced whenever neighbors asked what I was doing with my life. It lingered in the way my older brother, Daniel, was always introduced as the family's future, while I became the sentence everyone rushed to finish. Emily is still figuring things out. After hearing those words for years, I started believing them. Maybe I really was the useless daughter everyone had to tolerate. At 23, I worked the front desk at a small veterinary clinic just outside Cedar Ridge, Ohio. It wasn't glamorous, but I liked helping people and watching frightened pets relax once they realized they were safe. The paycheck barely covered my rent for a tiny one-bedroom apartment. Yet somehow I always managed to put aside enough money to visit my grandmother every Sunday afternoon. Those visits became the brightest part of my week. Grandma Margaret never looked at me the way everyone else did. She never asked why I hadn't become a lawyer like Daniel or why I wasn't climbing some impressive corporate ladder. Instead, she asked if I was eating enough, whether I was sleeping well, and what book I had been reading lately. She remembered the little things no one else noticed. She made me feel seen. My parents insisted she was becoming forgetful. They said age was making her confused, that she repeated stories because she no longer understood where she was. But every Sunday, she beat me at crossword puzzles, remembered birthdays going back 40 years, and somehow knew when I was pretending to smile. One rainy afternoon, she squeezed my hand and whispered something I hadn't thought about since childhood. "Do you still remember Blackbird 17? My heart skipped. Blackbird 17 wasn't a place or a person. It was our secret. When I was 8 years old, Grandma had invented a series of code words. During a treasure hunt in her backyard, she told me every family should have a language only the people who truly loved each other could understand. Most of the codes were silly, but one rule was never a game. If either of us ever sent the words Blackbird 17, it meant one thing only. I'm in danger. Come find me yourself. Don't trust anyone else." I laughed nervously that afternoon and told her of course I remembered. She smiled, though something in her eyes looked strangely distant. Before I could ask why she brought it up, my mother entered the room carrying tea and quickly changed the subject. "Mom gets these strange ideas sometimes," she said with an embarrassed laugh. "Don't encourage her imagination." Grandma didn't argue. She simply looked at me for a second longer than usual. I couldn't explain why, but that expression stayed with me long after I drove home. 3 days later, my father called while I was organizing appointment files at work. His voice was unusually calm. "Your grandmother has been moved to a private care facility. The doctors think it's better if she doesn't have visitors for a while." "What facility?" I asked immediately. There was a pause. "Somewhere closer to Cleveland." "What's the name?" Another pause. "Don't worry about it, Emily. We'll handle everything." Then he hung up. Something didn't feel right. Grandma had never mentioned moving. She hated hospitals. She once joked she'd rather spend her last day planting tomatoes than staring at white walls. That evening I called my mother. She didn't answer. Daniel sent a text telling me to stop making things harder for everyone. By midnight, I had convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was letting my imagination run away with me, just like they always claimed. At exactly 12:17 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I almost ignored it. The screen showed an unknown number. There was only one message. Blackbird 17. No punctuation. No explanation. Just those 2 words. My entire body went cold. Only one person in the world knew that code besides me. Grandma Margaret. Message. My hands were trembling so badly that I almost dropped the phone onto the hardwood floor. Blackbird 17. It was impossible. Grandma had promised me when I was 8 years old that the code would never be used unless there was absolutely no one else she could trust. We had repeated the rules every summer while sitting on the old porch swing behind her farmhouse. If the message ever appeared, I was supposed to come alone. I was supposed to believe the code, not the explanations that followed. I read the text again, then again. The unknown number could have belonged to anyone, but the words could not. I immediately pressed the call button. It rang once before disconnecting. I tried again. This time I received an automated message saying the number was unavailable. I sent a reply asking where she was. Nothing came back. I waited for 5 minutes, then 10, watching the screen as though another message might suddenly appear. It never did. Sleep was impossible. I spent the rest of the night sitting on my couch with every light turned on, replaying my last conversation with Grandma. The way she had asked if I remembered the code no longer felt nostalgic. It felt like preparation. By sunrise, I had already made up my mind. I called the veterinary clinic, explained that I had a family emergency, and drove straight to Willow Creek Senior Living, the place where Grandma had lived for nearly 3 years. The receptionist recognized me immediately. She smiled the same warm smile she always did, but it faded the moment I asked for Grandma Margaret Carter. Her fingers stopped moving across the keyboard. She looked confused. "She checked out several days ago," she said carefully. "Checked out?" I repeated. "With who?" The woman glanced at the monitor again. "I am sorry. I cannot discuss private records. She is my grandmother." "I understand, but the file has been marked as transferred." "Transferred where?" She hesitated. "There is no destination listed." My stomach tightened. "Can I speak with someone who knows?" A supervisor came out a few minutes later. He was polite, but equally unhelpful. According to the paperwork, my grandmother had been released into family care. Every required signature appeared complete. Every document looked perfectly ordinary. Yet when I asked who signed the release papers, he quietly admitted something strange. The digital archive had already been removed from the system. "Removed?" I asked. "Records are never removed." He lowered his voice. "That is exactly why this concerns me." I thanked him and walked back outside, where the bright morning sunshine suddenly felt cold. Sitting in my car, I called my father. He answered after the 4th ring. "What are you doing at the care center?" he asked before I even spoke. I froze. I had not told anyone where I was. "How did you know I came here?" Silence. Then he sighed impatiently. "Emily, you need to stop chasing this. Your grandmother is resting where she needs to be." "Where is she?" "That is none of your concern. She sent me a message last night." Another silence, longer this time. "What message?" His voice had changed. It was sharper now. "She texted me." "That is impossible." The words came too quickly, almost before I finished speaking. "Why is it impossible?" I asked. "Because." He stopped himself. "Because she does not even know how to send text messages." He ended the call before I could answer. I remained frozen behind the steering wheel. My father had just revealed something he could not possibly know. I had never mentioned that the message came through my phone. I only said Grandma had sent me a message. Somehow, he immediately assumed it was a text. My heartbeat quickened as another memory surfaced. Grandma absolutely knew how to text. I had taught her myself during the pandemic. She even insisted on using too many smiley faces because she said they made conversations friendlier. My father had lied without realizing I knew the truth. Before I could process everything, my phone vibrated once more. This time it was not another message. It was an email notification from an account I had not seen in almost 5 years. The sender's name was simply M. Carter. Attached was a single scanned photograph. It showed Grandma and me standing beside the old oak tree behind her farmhouse when I was 8 years old. On the back of the photograph, written in her unmistakable handwriting, were 6 words that made my pulse race even faster. "Start where the roots remember everything." I drove toward my grandmother's old farmhouse without telling anyone where I was going. The drive took just under an hour, following narrow county roads lined with cornfields that stretched toward the horizon. Every mile brought back memories I had almost forgotten. Summer afternoons chasing butterflies. Fresh peach pie cooling on the kitchen windowsill. Grandma laughing every time I pretended to get lost during one of her treasure hunts. She always said that the land remembered things long after people forgot them. When I finally turned onto the gravel driveway, my chest tightened. The farmhouse looked abandoned. The white paint had faded, weeds pushed through cracks in the walkway, and the front porch swing hung slightly crooked. My parents had sold the property years earlier after Grandpa passed away, insisting there was no reason to keep an old house that nobody used anymore. I parked beneath the massive oak tree that had stood there longer than anyone in the family could remember. Looking at the photograph again, I realized Grandma had not written, "Start where the tree stands." She had written, "Start where the roots remember everything." That choice of words mattered. I stepped out of the car and walked around the enormous trunk, running my hand along the rough bark. At first I saw nothing unusual. Then I remembered another one of Grandma's games. Whenever she hit a prize, she never placed it where everyone looked. She always said the answer was usually one step lower than pride allowed. I knelt beside the exposed roots, brushing away layers of dry leaves and loose soil with my hands. After several minutes, my fingers struck something solid. It was not a rock. It was a small rusted metal box buried beneath one of the larger roots. My heartbeat echoed in my ears as I carefully lifted it free. The lock had long since corroded, opening with only gentle pressure. Inside rested a single brass key, a folded envelope sealed with blue wax, and an old Polaroid photograph of Grandma standing beside a younger man I did not recognize. Written across the bottom in black ink were the words, "Some promises survive longer than people." I opened the envelope first. My name appeared on the front in Grandma's elegant handwriting. "Emily, if you are reading this, it means you trusted your heart instead of the stories others told you. That alone tells me I chose the right granddaughter." Tears blurred my vision before I reached the next sentence. "There are people who will convince you that confusion is the same as truth. They will repeat something often enough that you begin to doubt your own memories. Never surrender your memories to someone else's convenience." If you received our code, it means I could not safely explain everything face to face. You must not tell your parents what you have found. Not yet. Trust actions, not explanations. I folded the letter carefully and reached for the brass key. A tiny paper tag was attached with faded string. Box 214. First Federal Savings. Cedar Ridge Branch. My mind raced. I had never heard Grandma mention a safe deposit box. Why would she hide the key instead of leaving it with her will or attorney? Unless she believed someone would be searching for it. As I slipped everything back into the metal box, tires crunched across the gravel behind me. I turned quickly. A dark gray sport utility vehicle rolled slowly into the driveway before stopping 20 yards away. The driver's door opened, and Daniel stepped out. He looked around until his eyes landed on me beside the oak tree. His expression was impossible to read. "I had a feeling you would come here," he said as he walked closer. I instinctively closed the lid of the metal box before he could see inside. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Dad tracked your phone." My stomach dropped. "He what?" Daniel nodded awkwardly. "He has been worried about you." I almost laughed at the absurdity of those words. My father had never tracked my phone before. Why start now? Daniel stopped a few feet away and looked toward the tree instead of at me. "Emily," he said quietly, "whatever Grandma told you before she disappeared, forget it. It is better for everyone if you let this go." For the first time in years, I looked directly into my brother's eyes and realized he was not speaking with confidence. He was speaking with fear, and somehow, that frightened me far more than anything else I had discovered so far. Daniel had always been the golden child. Growing up, he won science fairs, earned scholarships, and collected praise as naturally as breathing. I was the quiet younger sister who stayed out of trouble, and somehow that made me invisible. Standing across from him beneath the old oak tree, I expected confidence, maybe even arrogance. Instead, I saw something I had never seen before. He looked exhausted. His shoulders were tense, and his eyes kept drifting toward the road as though he expected someone else to arrive. "Forget what?" I asked calmly. "You keep telling me to stop asking questions, but nobody will tell me why." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "Because sometimes the truth only makes things worse." That sounds like something Dad would say. He sighed. "Emily, please. Just come home." "Where is Grandma?" His silence answered before he ever opened his mouth. "I do not know," he admitted quietly. "Then why are you asking me to stop looking?" He swallowed hard. "Because that is what Dad wants." For several long seconds neither of us spoke. The breeze rustled through the branches above us, carrying the familiar scent of fresh grass and old wood. Finally, I asked the question that had been bothering me ever since he arrived. "Are you afraid of disappointing Dad?" Daniel looked away. "You still think this family works the way it did when we were kids?" "What does that mean?" He hesitated, clearly debating whether to continue. "It means things are more complicated than you realize." Before I could press him further, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and the color drained from his face. Without answering, he slipped the phone back into his pocket. "I have to go," he said. "Emily, if anyone asks, you were never here today." Then he turned, climbed back into the sport utility vehicle, and drove away without another word. I remained beneath the tree long after the sound of the engine disappeared. Daniel had not denied that our father was hiding something. He had not claimed Grandma was safe. More importantly, he had never asked what I had found beneath the tree. It was almost as if he already knew there had been something hidden there. I waited another 15 minutes before returning to my car. Instead of driving home, I headed straight towards Cedar Ridge. The brass key rested inside my jacket pocket, feeling far heavier than its size suggested. The First Federal Savings Building sat on the corner of Main Street, exactly where it had stood for decades. Its brick exterior looked unchanged since my childhood. Inside, everything smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh coffee. A friendly employee greeted me with a practiced smile. "How may I help you today?" I placed the brass key on the counter. "I believe this belongs to a safe deposit box registered to my grandmother, Margaret Carter." The woman examined the tag before typing into her computer. Her expression changed almost immediately. "One moment, please." She disappeared into a nearby office and returned with the branch manager, a gray-haired gentleman wearing silver glasses. "Miss Carter," he asked politely, "would you come with me?" He led me into a small private office and closed the door behind us. "Your grandmother visited us approximately 2 weeks ago," he began. "She left very specific instructions regarding this box." My pulse quickened. "Instructions?" He nodded. "She told us the contents were to remain inaccessible unless you personally arrived with the original key and presented government identification." I handed him my driver's license. He compared the information carefully before smiling for the first time. Then I believe she expected this day to come. Minutes later, we entered the secure vault. The manager unlocked a narrow metal drawer marked 214 before stepping back to give me privacy. Inside was not jewelry or cash as I had expected. There was a thick accordion folder filled with documents, several flash drives neatly labeled by year, and another sealed envelope with my name written across the front. Resting on top of everything else was a handwritten note in Grandma's unmistakable script. "If you are opening this box, then someone has already begun rewriting our family's history. Do not let them finish." My hands lingered on the envelope for several seconds before I finally broke the seal. Every instinct told me that once I started reading, there would be no returning to the comfortable version of my life I had accepted for so many years. Grandma's letter was only 3 pages long, but every sentence felt carefully chosen. She began by reminding me of something she used to say when I was little. "The strongest lock is not made of steel. It is made of a story that everyone agrees to believe." I kept reading. She explained that people often accepted convenient versions of the truth because they required less courage than asking difficult questions. "If I had reached the safe deposit box," she wrote, "then I had already noticed that too many people were repeating the same explanations while offering almost no real answers. She urged me not to confront anyone until I understood the entire picture. At the bottom of the final page, she underlined one sentence twice. Follow the documents before you follow emotions. I carefully opened the accordion folder. The first section contained copies of property records stretching back nearly 30 years. At first they seemed ordinary, but a pattern quickly emerged. Several family assets that I believed my parents owned had actually remained under Grandma's name the entire time. There were handwritten notes attached to many of the pages, each explaining why ownership had never been transferred. The next section contained medical records. I frowned as I compared the dates. My parents had repeatedly told me that Grandma's memory had declined rapidly over the previous year. Yet the cognitive evaluations inside the folder painted a completely different picture. Examination after examination described her as alert, independent, and fully capable of making legal and financial decisions. Even the physician's summary stated that occasional forgetfulness was consistent with normal aging rather than significant impairment. My heartbeat quickened. If these reports were accurate, someone had deliberately exaggerated Grandma's condition. I reached for one of the flash drives. The branch manager kindly allowed me to use a small office with a computer. After inserting the drive, a list of folders appeared on the screen. Bank statements, legal correspondence, voice recordings, scanned letters. Everything had been organized with remarkable precision. Grandma had anticipated that whoever found these files might have to piece together the truth one document at a time. I opened the legal correspondence first. Most of it involved routine estate planning until I reached several emails exchanged with the family's longtime attorney, Harold Bennett. I recognized his name immediately. He had handled every major legal matter for my parents since I was a child. At first his messages sounded professional, but as I continued reading, the tone gradually shifted. He repeatedly encouraged Grandma to simplify her estate, insisting that transferring authority to other family members would reduce unnecessary complications. Grandma politely refused every suggestion. Her replies remained respectful, yet firm. She insisted that no changes would be made until she personally reviewed every document. Then, without warning, the email chain stopped. There were no further replies from either side. Curious, I opened one of the voice recordings. Grandma's familiar voice filled the room. "Emily, if you are hearing this, it means I no longer trust written conversations alone. Documents can disappear. Memories can be challenged. But people often reveal more than they intend when they believe no one is paying attention." She paused before continuing. "Do not assume every person standing beside your parents understands the entire plan. Some are following instructions without knowing where they lead." I leaned back in my chair, replaying that sentence several times. Until now I had believed my parents were directing everything. But Grandma's words suggested someone else might be shaping events behind the scenes. As I closed the recording, another file caught my attention. It was simply labeled meeting notes. Inside was a scanned page from Grandma's personal notebook. One name appeared again and again, circled in blue ink. Harold Bennett. Beside it she had written a single sentence that sent a chill through me. He stopped protecting this family the moment he realized he could control it. At that exact moment my phone vibrated across the desk. The screen displayed an unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. A calm male voice spoke before I could introduce myself. "Miss Carter, my name is Harold Bennett. I believe you recently opened something that your grandmother intended you to misunderstand. We should meet before you make a mistake that cannot be undone." For several seconds I said nothing. The silence stretched between us until Harold Bennett spoke again, his voice steady and measured, carrying the confidence of a man who had spent decades convincing people to trust him. "Miss Carter, your grandmother was under tremendous emotional strain during the past year. She created misunderstandings where none existed. I would hate for those misunderstandings to damage your family permanently." I looked through the office window toward the quiet bank lobby below. "If that is true," I replied carefully, Then you should not mind if I continue reading everything she left behind. He paused just long enough for me to notice. Documents without context are dangerous, he answered. Meet me this afternoon. I can explain everything. Where? My office. 3 o'clock. Before ending the call, he added one final sentence. Please do not involve your parents. They have been carrying enough already. The line went dead. I slowly lowered the phone. Grandma had warned me not to trust explanations before evidence. Harold was asking me to do exactly the opposite. Instead of opening another document, I replayed the voice recording once more. People often reveal more than they intend when they believe no one is paying attention. Suddenly I realized I did not have to confront Harold. I only had to listen. At exactly 3 o'clock, I entered his downtown office carrying only my purse and a small notebook. The accordion folder remained locked inside my car. Harold Bennett greeted me with a warm smile that reminded me of every family holiday I could remember. He had attended birthday parties, graduation dinners, even Grandpa's memorial service. Until this week, I had always thought of him as part of the family. Emily, he said kindly, you have grown up. Apparently not enough for anyone to tell me the truth. His smile faded just slightly before he motioned toward a chair. The office walls were lined with framed degrees and photographs beside local business leaders. Everything about the room suggested stability and trust. Harold folded his hands across the desk. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman. She also became increasingly suspicious during her later years. Her medical evaluations disagree with that. He blinked almost imperceptibly. You found those? Yes. Medical reports cannot always measure emotional judgment. I did not answer. Instead, I asked, why did she refuse to transfer control of her estate? Harold leaned back. Because she believed one grandchild deserved everything. The words caught me off guard. Everything. She loved you deeply, Emily. Sometimes love clouds good decision-making. You are saying she made a mistake? I am saying families should share responsibilities equally. I watched him carefully. Throughout the conversation, he kept referring to fairness, balance, and responsibility. He never once mentioned Grandma's disappearance. Finally, I interrupted him. Where is she? For the first time since I entered the office, he looked genuinely uncomfortable. I do not know. When did you last see her? About 2 weeks ago. What did you discuss? Estate planning. Did she trust you? Another brief hesitation. Until recently, yes. That single phrase echoed in my mind. Until recently. What changed? I asked. Harold smiled again, but this time it looked rehearsed. Old age can make people question those who have helped them for years. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, yet I noticed something strange. Every answer he gave explained why Grandma might have doubted others. None explained why he seemed to know exactly what she had left behind. When I finally stood to leave, he offered his hand. Think carefully before believing every document you find. I nodded politely and walked toward the door. As my hand touched the doorknob, I heard another voice outside in the hallway. Harold, Richard has called 3 times already. He wants to know whether Emily accepted the offer. I stopped without moving. Harold answered in a lower voice, believing I had already stepped outside. Not yet. She has more of Margaret in her than we expected. We will need another approach. My heartbeat accelerated. There was no mention of concern for my grandmother. No discussion about protecting the family. Only strategy. I quietly remained where I was until footsteps faded down the hallway. Then I left the building through a side exit without letting anyone see me. Sitting inside my car, I finally understood what Grandma had been trying to tell me. Harold was not simply reacting to the situation. He had been anticipating every move I might make. Before I could start the engine, my phone chimed with a new email. There was no sender name, only an encrypted attachment and a single sentence in the message body. If Harold contacted you first, then you are already one step behind. Open the video before anyone realizes you have it. I did not open the attachment until I reached my apartment. Every instinct told me that whatever waited inside could change everything again and I wanted to be somewhere I controlled before I saw it. After locking the front door, closing every curtain, and silencing my phone, I opened my laptop and downloaded the encrypted file. The password field appeared immediately. At first I stared at it in frustration, but then I remembered Grandma's favorite saying whenever we played puzzles together. The first answer is usually hiding inside the first question. I typed Blackbird 17 exactly as the text message had appeared. The file unlocked instantly. A single video filled the screen. Grandma was sitting at her kitchen table, wearing the same blue sweater she had worn during one of my Sunday visits only a month earlier. She looked calm, healthy, and completely aware of where she was. She smiled gently before speaking. "Hello, Emily. If you are watching this, then events unfolded almost exactly the way I feared they would. First, I need you to know something very important. I am safe at the moment. I recorded this message. If I disappear later, it will not be because I became confused. It will be because I chose to leave before someone else could make decisions for me." I felt tears gathering in my eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. Every person who claimed she had lost touch with reality had been wrong. She continued, "You have probably started wondering why I trusted you instead of the rest of the family. The answer has nothing to do with money. It has everything to do with character. Since you were a little girl, you were the only person who asked questions because you wanted the truth instead of the answer that made life easier. Never lose that." She paused and reached for a folder resting beside her. "Everything I own could have been divided many different ways. Property can be replaced. Investments rise and fall. But integrity is rare. That is why I decided years ago that the person responsible for protecting this family would not necessarily be the person receiving the most praise." My breathing slowed as another realization settled over me. Grandma had not been preparing me to inherit wealth. She had been preparing me to protect the truth. "Do not hate your parents," she said softly. "People can be manipulated long before they realize they are following someone else's plan. Fear is persuasive. Embarrassment is persuasive. Pride is persuasive. Remember that before you judge them too harshly." That sentence completely changed the way I viewed everything. Until now, I had believed my parents were directing the deception. Grandma believed they had become part of it without fully understanding who benefited most. Then her expression grew serious. "The person you must watch most carefully is the one who always offers to solve everyone's problems. Listen more than you speak. The truth often arrives disguised as confidence." The video ended with one final instruction. "Inside the folder you found are coordinates written on the back of a photograph. Go there alone tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning. If everything has gone according to plan, someone will be waiting who can tell you the rest." I immediately searched through the documents until I found the old photograph of Grandma standing beside the unfamiliar younger man. Turning it over, I noticed faint pencil marks I had overlooked before. They formed a set of map coordinates leading to a public botanical garden nearly 40 miles away. The next morning, I arrived 15 minutes early. Families wandered the walking paths while gardeners trimmed flower beds under the warm summer sun. Nothing about the place suggested secrecy. I followed the coordinates to a quiet bench overlooking a small pond. For several minutes, no one appeared. Just as I began wondering whether I had misunderstood the instructions, an elderly woman carrying a canvas gardening bag approached with a gentle smile. "You must be Emily," she said. "Margaret always insisted you would come, even if nobody else believed you would." Before I could respond, she reached into her bag and handed me a sealed envelope. Across the front, in Grandma's unmistakable handwriting, were 7 words that made my heart race all over again. "You are finally ready to meet the witness." My fingers hesitated over the envelope before I carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter and a folded business card. The card identified the elderly woman beside me as Eleanor Brooks, a retired certified public accountant. I looked up in surprise. She smiled gently. "Your grandmother and I worked together for almost 30 years, she said. "She trusted me with records that nobody else knew existed." I unfolded the letter first. Grandma's familiar handwriting immediately settled the anxiety that had followed me for days. Emily, if you are reading this, then Eleanor has decided you are ready. She knows every financial decision I made after your grandfather passed away. More importantly, she knows why I made them. Please listen before you decide whom to forgive and whom to blame. I folded the letter and turned toward Eleanor. She opened her gardening bag and removed a thin binder secured with color-coded tabs. Your grandmother asked me to keep copies outside the banking system, she explained. She believed that if everything remained in one place, someone might eventually control the entire story. We spent nearly 2 hours sitting on the bench while she carefully explained each document. She showed me financial statements proving that Grandma had quietly created education funds for both Daniel and me years ago. She had also established a charitable trust that supported local senior care programs. None of those decisions benefited her personally. Every record reflected thoughtful planning rather than confusion. Then Eleanor placed one final document in front of me. It was a timeline. Across several years, Grandma had documented every major conversation involving Harold Bennett. At first, his recommendations had been practical and reasonable. Gradually, they became more aggressive. He repeatedly encouraged restructuring ownership, simplifying authority, and consolidating control under temporary legal management. Grandma had refused each proposal. She started asking me to review everything independently, Eleanor said. That was when she became concerned. Did my parents know? I asked quietly. Eleanor sighed before answering. Not at first. Your father believed Harold was protecting the family from future legal complications. Your mother trusted your father's judgment. They stopped asking questions because they believed someone qualified was already asking them. Her words echoed what Grandma had said in the video. Fear and convenience had slowly replaced curiosity. My parents had made mistakes, but they had also relied on someone they had trusted for decades. And Daniel? I asked. Eleanor smiled sadly. Your brother suspected something was wrong several months ago. He contacted me once, asking whether your grandmother truly intended to change her estate. I told him I could not discuss confidential matters. After that, he stopped calling. Suddenly, Daniel's fearful expression beneath the oak tree made perfect sense. He had sensed the deception, but never possessed enough information to challenge it. Before I could ask another question, my phone vibrated. It was Daniel. I answered immediately. Emily, where are you? His voice sounded anxious. Why? Because Dad just received paperwork from Harold asking him to sign emergency authorization forms this afternoon. Dad thinks it is another routine update, but something feels wrong. I remembered what you said. I think Grandma was right. I looked toward Eleanor. She nodded almost imperceptibly, encouraging me to stay calm. Do not let him sign anything, I told Daniel. Can you keep everyone together until I get there? I will try. He lowered his voice. Emily, I should have listened to you sooner. The call ended. Eleanor carefully closed the binder before handing it to me. There is one more thing your grandmother wanted you to know, she said. She reached into the inner pocket of her bag and removed a small flash drive sealed inside a protective case. This contains the complete recording of the final meeting your grandmother requested with Harold Bennett. She legally recorded the conversation after notifying everyone present. Nothing in it was hidden or improper. She believed the truth would eventually matter more than opinions. My pulse quickened. Does it explain where she went? Eleanor smiled for the first time that afternoon with complete confidence. No, Emily. It explains why she chose to disappear before anyone else could decide her future for her. And once your family hears what Harold admitted during that meeting, nobody will ever be able to rewrite Margaret Carter's story again. By the time I arrived at my parents' house that evening, everyone was already gathered around the dining room table. My father looked exhausted, my mother appeared anxious, and Daniel stood near the window, watching for my car exactly as he had promised. Harold Bennett sat at the far end of the table with a neat stack of documents arranged in front of him. He smiled politely when I entered, But this time I recognized it for what it was. Confidence built on the assumption that nobody possessed the complete story. "Emily," my father said, sounding relieved. "Harold has been trying to help us settle everything. We need to sign a few final papers." I placed the binder, the flash drive, and Grandma's letters on the table without saying a word. Harold's expression changed almost instantly. It was only for a fraction of a second, but I saw genuine surprise replace certainty. "Before anyone signs anything," I said calmly, "I think we should all listen to something Grandma wanted us to hear." Harold leaned forward. "That is unnecessary. Margaret often recorded personal reflections. They are emotional rather than factual." I met his eyes. "Interesting. I never said this recording included you." The room fell silent. My father slowly turned toward Harold, who immediately looked away. Daniel connected the flash drive to the television in the family room. Within seconds, Grandma appeared on the screen sitting across a conference table. Harold himself was seated opposite her. A date and timestamp confirmed the meeting had taken place only days before her disappearance. Grandma's voice was steady. "As required by state law, everyone present understands this meeting is being recorded." Harold acknowledged the statement clearly. The conversation that followed was calm and professional. Grandma repeatedly refused to transfer authority over her estate until every financial recommendation had been independently reviewed. Harold responded by emphasizing efficiency and convenience. Then came the sentence that changed everything. Believing he was making a persuasive argument, Harold said, "Once the family signs temporary management authority, reversing those decisions would become extremely difficult." Grandma immediately asked, "So the control becomes permanent through temporary paperwork?" Harold hesitated before answering. "In practical terms, yes." Nobody in the living room spoke. My father stared at the television as though he had never seen the man beside him before. The recording continued. Grandma explained that she wanted every asset preserved until her family fully understood the implications of each decision. Harold insisted there was no need to involve additional independent advisors. The meeting ended with Grandma politely declining every recommendation. As the screen went dark, my mother covered her mouth with both hands. "Richard," she whispered to my father. We never knew she had asked these questions. My father slowly lowered the unsigned documents onto the table. He looked at Harold with quiet disappointment rather than anger. "You told us she was confused," he said softly. Harold attempted to respond, but no explanation matched the recording everyone had just witnessed. Facts had replaced assumptions. My father pushed the paperwork aside. "We are done." Harold gathered his briefcase without another word. He understood that trust, once lost, could not be restored through another explanation. After he left, the house remained silent for several minutes. Finally, my father turned toward me. "Emily," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "All these years I believed I was protecting this family. Somewhere along the way I stopped asking whether I was protecting the truth." My mother reached across the table and took my hand. "We should have listened to you. We should have listened to her." A week later, I received one final letter from Grandma, mailed from a quiet coastal town several states away. She explained that she had chosen to step away temporarily until the legal confusion had settled because she wanted the family to discover the truth on its own rather than through another argument. She promised she was healthy, safe, and looking forward to coming home when the time was right. Several months later, she returned exactly as she had promised. There were no dramatic speeches, only long conversations, honest apologies, and the slow rebuilding of relationships that had been weakened by years of misunderstanding. Daniel and I became closer than we had ever been. My parents learned to question easy answers instead of accepting them. Grandma asked me to help oversee the charitable trust she had created, not because I was the smartest person in the family, but because she believed I would always protect people before paperwork. Sometimes I still look at the old message that changed everything. Two simple words reminded me that the loudest lies are often defeated by the quietest truth, and that the greatest gift anyone can leave behind is not wealth or property, but the courage to trust what you know in your heart when everyone else insists you are wrong.